Howdy, with this video I want to go over the schedule and then go over essay number 3. I'm doing this video on Friday, April 12th. Hopefully everybody got their 2 responses in on the poetry, and hopefully they're going to help you kind of lead into essay number 3, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But in terms of the schedule, for the 15th, I'm going to be looking for the first 2 paragraphs of essay number 3. These may be a little rough, but I want to make sure you've picked your poem, if you've gotten started on it. It may not, like I said, it might be pretty rough, but I want to make sure you're on the right track before you do the entire thing. On the 18th, I'm going to ask you to send me what you have so far. I'm not going to go over it in any real detail. That's the kind of stuff that you should be learning how to do. But I will check like the MLA formatting, make sure you're quoting properly, and answering any specific questions you have about your essay. I'll also send out a self-review with that, and so you can do the self-review on your own essay. Make sure you have all the little stuff. It's easy to finish this essay and then forget if, do I have dashes in there? It's like, well, I don't know. I thought I was done. But then you want to go back and make sure you have all that stuff in there. But on the 22nd, essay number 3 is due. I'll also send out the final exam prompts and response number 15. So you have a week to work on the final exam and response number 15. And number 15 is just a review of the course. It's nothing fancy there. Just take note, if you have any late work you need to get into me, 25th is the last day for that. Then I'm going to shut down all the drop boxes except for the final exam one in response 15. But then the final exam's due. Then on the 2nd, basically you're just waiting for me to get everything graded and get your grades back to you, right? And make sure they're correct. And obviously if there's anything wrong with the grades, you want to let me know. But that's it. We're down to the last few weeks here. So be sure, don't get stuck on anything. If you have any questions, ask quickly. And I'll get back to you as fast as I can. But for essay number 3, we're going to come here to material for essay number 3 on the poetry. You're going to see 4 documents. You're going to see the essay assignment itself. You're going to see a little handout about how to write a good poetry explication. A little, it's not really a lecture, just some notes on poetry terms, and a sample essay. So we'll look at the essay assignment itself. All right. For this essay, you got to write an 800-word minimum explication of one of the following poems. And an explication is an unfolding of the poem. You're going to take us line by line or stanza by stanza through the poem and show us what you see happening within that poem. So it's reader response, but it's an informed reader response because you've been in Comp 2 this entire semester, and hopefully you can respond intelligently to a poem. You have 8 to choose from, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You got 7 to choose from. Sorry, can't count. And they're copied below the first assignment page. Let me go over the assignment real quick. But like I say, an explication is a line by line or stanza by stanza informed response to a given work. It kind of depends on the poem which way you approach that. Some of these poems are might be only one stanza, so you may not be able to go stanza by stanza. Actually, the more I look at it, maybe not. But anyway, but you're going to be giving your detailed response to the poem, and again, you're trying to expand on the poem. If you're someone like me who likes to summarize things, this Emily Dickinson poem's about death, I'm done. You're not going to get an explication doing that. You got to be able to expand on what you're seeing and kind of relate each line to the next and show us what's happening within that poem. Some general rules: no biography, period. Even if you can find Gene Wagner and find some biography on her, don't put it in your essay. That's just no. You're just padding the essay. I don't care about Gene Wagner's biography. Now, I hope she's happy and doing well in her life, but that's not what we're doing. It's you and the poem. And just get a quick 0 pretty quick on that one. Got to have all the fun punctuation. Those ellipses and brackets will start to become your friends once you learn how to use those, particularly in terms of making quotes fit grammatically into your what you're saying. No I, get, it, or you, unless they're in a direct quote. There might be an exception. If you were raised in Damp, Virginia, and you know the town, you might put a little bit of I in there, just talking about your personal experiences, but none of this, I personally think that this poem does this. Your name's on the paper, of course it's you thinking, you don't have to put I there. And you should use at least 5 of these poetry terms. And again, that handout goes to the different terms. Hopefully some of these you already know. Some of these you do all the time. You just may not have a big word for it. But make sure you go over the short lecture there, or the handout, so you understand what those are. But the poems are given to you here. Damp, Virginia. Damp, Virginia is a small town, coal mining town. It used to be a coal mining town. It's not much coal there now. In Southwest Virginia. And when I talk about stanzas, we're talking about groups of lines like this. So here's stanza number 1. Then here's stanza number 2. Then stanza number 3. Then stanza number 4. Then stanza number 5. So as you're thinking about how to organize your essay, I would probably spend a paragraph on each stanza, and that's how I'd organize my essay. I'd have a 5-paragraph essay here. Not the standard one from high school where you have the 3-point thesis and stuff like that. We're not doing that with this essay. But you might just spend a paragraph on each stanza, and that's how you're going to structure your essay. The poem talks about Damp, Virginia, and what the poet's seeing there. The next one, A Woman with Black Balloons by Jean Wagner, maybe Jeanne, I'm not sure, I've never met her. Again, this one's kind of interesting because the title kind of falls into the first stanza. But again, you might break down your essay in terms of by spending a paragraph on each stanza. I'm sorry, but a very interesting poem. If you're kind of young and don't know what black balloons are used for, usually you get those for your 40th or 50th birthday by smart alecky people who are kind of suggesting that you're getting close to death. Right? It's kind of it's a funny thing, but it's also kind of morbid at the same time, and she's kind of tapping into that kind of idea. I taught a course in Italy, Comp 2 course in Italy for the Tennessee Consortium of International Studies. If you're interested in international studies, you should look into that. And I've got a couple of poems from Italian poets here. Same kind of thing. This is kind of a love poem in a way, or kind of a poem about an ex, maybe. It's kind of up to you. I don't want to tell you what the poem's about. You're going to take us line by line through the poem and tell us what you think the poem's about, right? So you may get something quite different from me. And the general idea of an explication is that you're going to use short quotes frequently so that I can kind of see where you're getting your ideas from. So even if I don't quite agree with your interpretation of the poem, I should be able to see where you got your ideas from and how those ideas are relating to other ideas within the poem. And generally, the ones I kind of go like, I never thought about it like that. Those are the kind of the better explications sometimes. Alrighty, so we got Everything Changes. Then we got another one from an Italian poet, a love monologue. With this one, this is just one long stanza, so you're going to have to figure out within your essay where you're going to put the paragraph breaks. You don't want just one long paragraph in your essay, right? That's going to get pretty tedious to read. You want to figure out where the natural breaks are in the poem and how you're going to organize your paragraphs as you go through the poem. Kind of a nice little poem there. This one's by a Northeast State student. This was actually in our Echoes and Images way back in the day. And it's kind of a short poem. Be careful. Sometimes, it's kind of hopefully fairly easy to get. But you got to get at least 800 words out of this. And so, again, can you expand on these lines, show us how the poem functions, and show us what you're seeing within the poem, and be able to expand on those ideas. But kind of a nice little poem. A little sad, maybe, depending on how you interpret it. Then one called Numerology, about turning the age of 7. For this poet, apparently it's kind of a magical age, but also a point where she's having to kind of grow up a little bit in some ways, learn more about the world. And again, you might spend a paragraph on each stanza. Again, that'd be a 5-paragraph essay, which can work well for this particular format. Then this be the simile. The last poem, and again, it's another shorter one. So make sure you're pretty good at expanding on your ideas, developing ideas, so you can make the 800 word count. Generally with this essay, it's easy to get to the first 500 words, but then you're like, I thought I was done. Or am I going to get 300 more words? So you have to go back and see where you've kind of skipped some lines or skipped some words. And you need to go back and expand on what you're saying, because it's actually a fairly short poem. And it's not written by Philip Larkin. It's kind of paying homage to Philip Larkin's poem, This Be the Verse. If you're going to go read that poem, be careful. There's a cuss word at the beginning. But it's a pretty funny poem in a way. But this poem's kind of in response to that. And again, I get a lot of different interpretations on this poem. I get some awfully good explications on it too. So it's not like everybody's supposed to write the same thing. It's not a math problem. You're kind of putting a little bit of yourself into your explication and saying, here's, this is what I'm seeing in the poem, even though you're not going to use the word I within your essay. All right, so there's your poems to choose from. There is this handout, How to Write a Good Poetry Explication. I'm going to encourage you to come back to this every once in a while, especially once you get your first 2 paragraphs done. I'm going to go through this pretty carefully. You can read faster than I can talk. But obviously you want to read the poem. I encourage students to print it off and make, kind of go through and annotate it, make comments. If you don't understand the word, circle it and put a question mark there and make sure you go back and look that word up, right? You don't want to skip over words. You don't want to skip over lines just because you don't understand them. When you get into writing about literature, you don't say, I don't understand this. You say, this poem contains ambiguity. And then you want to explain where the ambiguity is. Like, it could be this, could be that, could be this. Excuse me. You don't want a formal introduction paragraph or conclusion paragraph. Be sure to internalize that. No introduction, no conclusion. So none of this, in the beginning, poetry served mankind for... No, none of that. And that's also a sexist word, right? But anyway, no introduction paragraph. You're going to start in line 1 of A Woman with Black Balloons by Gene Wagner. This starts happening. You're going to start with the first line and take us to the poem. And when you get to the last line, you may add another sentence or two to bring your ideas to a conclusion, or you may finish on a final thought. But you're not going to go back and summarize what you've already said or start another line of thought. Once you get to the last line of the poem, you should be looking to get out of the essay. Quite often the introductions or conclusions are a good place to pad the word count and make sure you get the word count, but you can't do it with this essay. And that's one of the big challenges with this essay. No biography. Like I said, begin with the first line of the poem, end with the last line of the poem, and then take a stanza by stanza or line by line, depending on the poem, and just show us how it's happening. You want to go in a straight line as much as possible. Line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4, line 5. Different lines have different lengths. Some lines bleed into the next. So you may say, in lines 1 through 3, this is what's happening in the poem. But don't skip major sections. That's kind of a big no-no with explications. Don't pass in important words, particularly things like colors. A Woman with Black Balloons, I expect you to talk about what the color black signifies when we put them in an object that's supposed to be kind of celebratory. Why would you have a black balloon? Same thing in Damn Virginia, you see there's different colors like yellow. What does the color yellow signify within that poem? Don't skip colors or important words like that. You want to use at least 5 of the poetry terms. What did the assignment sheet say? Hold on. Yeah, you just have to use 5, not 7. Make sure you have you don't have to define those terms within your essay, but you have to use them properly. The big trick with this essay, you want to use frequent short quotes to let us know, to keep us focused on where you're at within the poem and where you're getting your ideas from. If you start saying that Tara is obviously about Obamacare, I'm going to be like, wow, this is going to be an interesting essay. And you're probably going to have a hard time using short quotes to support what you're saying, to say that that poem's about Obamacare. And that's one sign you might be a little off track. If you're kind of going on a line of thought, then you realize, oh, I can't use a quote from the poem to support what I'm saying. You might be maybe a little bit off on the wrong track. You're going to cite using the line number from the poem instead of a page number. You can give the line number when you introduce a quote, or you can do it after the quote in the parentheses. We'll take a look at that with the sample essay. You want to kind of avoid long quotes if you can. It may not be possible. Like Damn Virginia has a lot of very short lines, so you may end up doing 4 or more lines and a quote. But if you do a long quote, you tab the whole thing over, and it should look like the original. Make sure you stay focused on analyzing the poem. You can kind of venture off a little bit, but make sure you come back. For example, if you're doing Damp Virginia Late Summer and you've been to Damp Virginia, you can talk about that just for a little bit, but don't make it about you. You want to get back to analyzing the poem, right? Make sure you comment and introduce any quotes you use in your essay. That's just one of the skills you should be learning in this class. Also, you probably should have gotten that in Comp 1 a little bit, but Make sure you don't just give a quote and move on. The quote should support what you're saying, not say it for you. So don't make a quote its own sentence. Make sure you introduce it. Make sure you comment on it. Same thing with terms. If you say, hey, there's a metaphor here in Terra, what's the metaphor? Show us what it is and what that metaphor is indicating. Don't just say, hey, there's irony here. It's like, well, okay, good. What is that? What kind of irony? Why are you seeing that in the poem? Use brackets to show any change to a quote or addition. Use ellipses to show omissions. Like I said, this should kind of, you shouldn't be forcing those into your essay. You should be using them to make your quotes grammatically correct or make everything make sense. Make sure you end the explication with commentary on the last line of the poem or it kind of maybe an ending thought. Make sure you use a good ending of your own. Don't end your essay with a quote. You should never end your essay with somebody else's words, right? No concluding paragraph or repeating what you've already said in the explication. Also, don't spend that last paragraph going over the poetry terms. You should be doing that within the body of your essay. So again, the lack of introduction paragraph, the lack of conclusion paragraphs, is where kind of the 800 words starts to seem like maybe a little bit more than it sounded like at first. So no pad in your essay in that way. There are notes on the poetry terms. Just to read through them quickly. A lot of the stuff you kind of already do, right? If you tell someone, oh man, that fart's coming at me, I can see it about to hit me in the face. You're using synesthesia. You do this all the time. We're just putting a big word to it and seeing how it works in poetry. Make sure you kind of read through this. Every poem's going to have a lot of these, particularly this denotation versus connotation. All poets are going to play on the connotations of words. In fact, that's kind of what the English language does a lot. That's why it makes English so hard to learn, is that we don't always say what we mean. You can't just look up the dictionary word and understand what that word means, right? We got all kinds of forbidden words because of the connotations. But make sure you read through those. Make sure you include 5 in your essay. Again, you don't have to define them within your essay, but you want to use them properly. Oops. And there is a sample essay. If you've never read The Road Not Taken, maybe Google it real quick and hear somebody read it for you. And again, hopefully hearing the poets read their own works for the response papers kind of helps you go back and know how to read the poem that you're choosing. Be sure to read it out loud, see how the rhythm works and things like that. Don't just go da 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 da, because it's going to be hard to get much out of the poem doing that, right? But this is on a famous Robert Frost poem. But again, there's no introduction to the explication. There's no biography. Nobody cares that Robert Frost read at John F. Kennedy's inauguration. We're focused on analyzing the poem and going line by line or stanza by stanza through the poem. This poem kind of is set in stanzas, so we're going to go stanza by stanza. But even as you're going stanza by stanza, you're still going line by line within your paragraph. So here in the first stanza of his poem, The Road Not Taken, Robert Frost presents a scene familiar to all people through the persona of a traveler. Our traveler uses first-person narration to present us with the metaphor of 2 roads diverging in a yellow wood. So I'm starting to use my terms. You don't have to bold them if you don't want to. I just did it here so they kind of stand out. And notice I use my brackets there to show a change to the quote. I just changed that verb to an ing form. To make it fit into what I'm saying within the introduction and within my sentence structure. But once I say, hey, there's a metaphor in this poem, I'm going to explain what it is. A metaphor that represents the proverbial fork in the road when we all encounter when making a life decision. In lines 2 and 3, we find that our traveler must make a choice, cannot remain static, cannot travel both and be one traveler. Notice you want to use the slash to show line breaks within the poem. We did that with response number 14. And I'm using the ellipses to show that I ended the quote before I got to the end of the line. And that's what you want to do. You want to use frequent short quotes to keep us focused on where you're at within the poem. Then you want to comment on those quotes and show us what those indicate in terms of you analyzing the poem. You can do the citation. Again, this is line number. Sorry, the weather's changed today. You can do the citation here in parentheses at the end of the quote, or you can do it here as you introduce the quote within your own sentence. Either way is fine. It's good to mix it up a little bit so you're not doing the same thing. You don't want to keep going like in lines 2 and 3 this, and line 4 this, and line 5 this, and line 6 this, and line 7 this. It's going to get a little tedious reading your essay. So mix it up a little bit. The persona's point suggests that even if we decide not to choose, we are still heading down a path. If we choose not to marry, we've made a choice. If we choose not to have children, we've made a choice. Any life traveler must move forward in some direction. So kind of explaining what I'm seeing in the quote there. In addition, the narrator's observation of the color yellow up here in that line 1. I'm not going to skip past that, right? So talk about the color yellow there. It means caution. Could mean aging. Could mean all kinds of things. And kind of notice, kind of trying to expand on what that color yellow might mean. It might take a couple of sentences, right? The first stanza ends with the traveler peering down one of the roads to where it bent in the undergrowth. Because the traveler cannot see the future results of his possible journey down the first path, the reader gains a sense of ambivalence regarding the traveler's choice, which road will he choose. One problem with this sample essay, why am I assuming the narrator's male? Uh-oh. Is that a little sexism in there, or little boomer grammar? So I need to make sure I go back and justify why I might think the traveler's male, or I need to go back and maybe change pronouns to include everybody in here, right? So be careful about things like that. Just because the poet's male doesn't mean the person speaking in the poem's male. Just because I could not stop for death, the narrator's speaking from the grave doesn't mean Emily Dixon died to write that poem, right? So be careful with the persona in there. Be careful with gender and stuff. In the second stanza, ambivalence changes to ambiguity, multiple meanings. Both roads appear to be equally untraveled, and that's going to be the crux of this explication. Is that both roads, when the narrator's looking down them, look exactly the same, but it's only later in life that he justifies going down one particular path. Which is not how that poem's often interpreted. And I'm not going to read this whole thing to you, but notice frequent short quotes, citing using line number. If you go from one line to the next, you want to use a slash. In a short quote, you want to use a slash. And again, you can do the citations here, or you can do it at the end. And again, this one kind of goes stanza by stanza. At the end of this particular explication, the writer goes back to the beginning of the poem and talks about the title. It's not a bad way to do it, but I'm not going back in conclusion and repeating what's already been said or something like that. Getting all the punctuation in there, and again, ellipses and brackets start to be your friends a little bit with here. Whenever you want to change a verb tense or something like that, so it makes sense within the context of what you're writing. But again, frequent short quotes, support what you're saying, discuss those quotes. And hopefully you'll come up with a good explication. And hopefully you may not like all the poems that you get to choose from, but hopefully at least one's not going to be one you hate the least, and one that you can work with. But if you have any questions while you're working on it, be sure to let me know. Again, the first 2 paragraphs will be due on Monday. What you have so far should be due next Thursday. Then the essay is going to be due the following Monday. So moving quickly. So again, if you get stuck, let me know pretty quick. Don't wait till the 21st to tell me you're totally stuck on this. Or please don't. If you are still stuck on the 21st, let me know. But it gets harder to help people sometimes. But we'll stop there, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.